Welcome to Orienting Members with Intention, a webinar for AmeriCorps Vista leaders that is produced and published at U.S. taxpayer expense. This session looks at how Vista leaders can intentionally contribute to the orientation of new members to your project. We'll look at 3 themes that should be covered in orientation and at some ways to orient members whether they are spread across a region or located close by. I'm your host, Eric Powell, a training specialist at AmeriCorps Vista. I'm joined today by my colleague, Andy King, who is our main presenter. Later on in today's session, we'll hear from Mike Raleigh, an AmeriCorps Vista leader at the University of Alabama, Birmingham statewide Vista program. Let me briefly introduce our presenter, Andy King, who's a senior training specialist here at Vista headquarters. He plays several roles in supporting Vista leaders, not only through this webinar series, but also through his work on Vista leader orientation and in developing resources for the Vista campus. Andy, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk about how you as a Vista leader can put your stamp on the orientation that's provided to new members at your project to make sure that they're grounded in what they'll be doing and that it's covered in a thorough and interesting way. With Mike's help, we'll look at some examples of ways that you can infuse some of these ideas into upcoming orientations. So let's get started by looking at our agenda. Here's what we plan to cover in this webinar. We'll start by looking at what orientation is and why it matters. We'll have a chat activity to engage with this content. We'll spend the majority of time exploring 3 orientation themes, those of cause, systems, and social orientation. We'll share examples of each and spend some time spend some time engaging in a few activities to gather and share your ideas. And finally, we'll briefly talk about things to consider when planning an orientation. So let's explore our first concept and talk a bit about what it means to orient and why it's important. Let's start by looking at a timeline to help us see how orientation fits into the bigger process of onboarding. In this graphic that you see on the screen, you'll see that for Vista, onboarding new members is a fairly long period of time. It begins during the recruitment process and it extends into the term of service. Orientation begins just before the first day of service. The first part of orientation for AmeriCorps members provided by AmeriCorps itself is what's called Vista Member Orientation, or VMO. VMO is made up of e-learning modules that are found on the Vista campus, and then 2 live webinars that are hosted by us here in the Vista training unit. Candidates are asked to begin their VMO e-learning about 2 weeks before their start date. All sponsors are required to provide an on-site orientation and training, or OSOT, and this generally starts on a member's first day of service. OSOTs vary in length, but generally the orientation part happens in the first 1 to 3 weeks of service. One note, in this session, we won't be talking about the T in OSOT. That's the training that members receive, and that's designed to help them build their skills. We do have some on-demand webinars on the Vista campus that look at member training. So as I mentioned, Vista sponsors are required to provide an on-site orientation and training, and a description of the OSOT needs to be submitted to their regional office for review and approval. A sponsor can adjust the original plan with the regional office, but leaders don't really have that authority. And a leader can certainly help develop the plan, but they're not in a position to submit it to the regional office. Leaders should review the project's OSOT plan first and make sure that whatever it is that you're doing fits into that plan. Now, there are no hard and fast lines about what leaders should or shouldn't be doing during orientation, but given the unique perspectives that leaders bring, that of having served previously and knowing what it feels like to be in the member's shoes, leaders can be especially effective on topics related to the member experience. So orienting for new members is the process of preparing a new VISTA member for a clear relationship with AmeriCorps, with their service site, the community, and their role. Orientation aims to get new members to feel comfortable with and to understand the purpose and inner workings of their sponsoring organization, to get a grasp on important background information, and also to have some practical knowledge that they're going to need in service. Orientation is learning one's direction and getting their bearings. It's about getting new members acclimated to the environment and getting their feet underneath them. So that's what we mean when we say to orient. And before we move on, I'm interested in hearing what your orientation to VISTA was like when you first started. And Eric will explain how.
We would like to hear about your own orientation experience, so we'll use the chat for this activity. Think back to when your sponsor or others provided you with an orientation to the VISTA project and to the organization. What was most memorable about the orientation you received, and what stood out to you most from that experience? Go ahead and respond to this question in the chat, and certainly it may take you a minute or two to think about what was most memorable in terms of your orientation experience. And as a few responses come in, I'll read a few of them off. So Becca mentions that self-care was the most memorable experience, which I can definitely resonate with, as having been a former member and really taking care of yourself and making sure that you have everything you need. Shirley mentions the most memorable part was mapping disparities around Austin, Texas, and really reflecting on how that connects to the VISTA service and the impact that's being made. Absolutely. See several other responses coming in. Andy, what do you see or what do you make of some of these additional responses coming in?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. And thanks to everybody who's responded so far. There's a great variety here, which is really nice to see. One of the themes I'm noticing is the people, right? So getting to meet certain people within the organization or within the community. And the other is really learning some of the practical stuff, right? Getting to know how to do things or how to get around or where things are. So those are just a couple of highlights there. But oh, and then the third, sorry, I forgot to say, was the training. That whether it's through webinars or other kinds of specific trainings that the people are learning about their role, learning about the expectations. So thanks for everybody who's responded so far, and feel free to continue dropping your thoughts in there. And we will go ahead and move on. So in terms of benefits of orientation, there are at least 4. That is 4 benefits of providing a solid and thorough orientation to new members. And we'll look at each one of them. First, orientation increases knowledge. A number of you were talking about this just a second ago. Giving new members key information so they know what's expected of them and how they can get their needs met. Knowledge about the project is essential so that your members can communicate effectively with others about AmeriCorps and the organization's goals. Next, orienting your members increases their confidence. When they have clear expectations about their role and know how what they're doing fits into the mission, your members will feel competent to perform their service, and they'll be enthusiastic about their commitment to the purpose of the organization and to AmeriCorps service. A good orientation builds connections between new members and the people they'll be working with. Again, a number of you highlighted this dimension. Relationships are key to community work, and being connected to the right people helps your members feel valued and gives them a sense of belonging. During challenging times, that sense of belonging can give members reassurance that they have professional connections and resources that they can turn to for help. And lastly, and again, some of you mentioned this, a benefit of having an effective orientation is that it can help avoid future problems. Whether we're talking about a member lacking foundational information that they need to complete their VAD, or a member who unknowingly provides misinformation, or one who leaves service early. Orientation can help head off unnecessary issues, both in the short term and long term. Now we're going to explore three themes, three overall ideas or themes that should be covered in your member orientation. The first one is cause orientation, and this one provides information that conveys the purpose of the organization. The elements in this theme answer the question for the member, why should I serve here? Systems orientation introduces new members to how the organization works, its structure, and its processes. It provides an organizational context for the member, and it makes them understand how they fit in. This theme answers the question, how do things work here? And finally, social orientation introduces the member to the people and the community that they're being asked to join. Social aspects of an organization refer to its culture and the relationships between the people there. This theme answers the question for the member, where do I fit in with everyone else? So the first theme we'll look at is cause orientation. This is sometimes called mission orientation, and it focuses on conveying the project's purpose, its work, and its activities. Specifically, you should cover the mission and values and the history of the organization, that is, how the organization came to be, and how they've come to work in their issue or focus area. Also, the cause includes the organization's goals and objectives, programs and services it provides, and the recipients of those services. Bottom line, you want your members to know the problem that the organization is trying to solve. And in the case of AmeriCorps Vista orientation, the cause piece, the cause orientation should also cover how the Vista project fits in with the organization's mission and its goals. This is a key area where leaders can contribute very well and help make sure that your members see that alignment between the organization and AmeriCorps. New members should know the history the agency has with AmeriCorps, whether there were members who served before them, and if so, what they accomplished, and how it aligns with what's currently happening with their service. I want to share a few examples of activities that can provide members with orientation to the cause. First, you could share key documents with the member to read on their own, including things like the Vista project application, the organization's strategic plan, or maybe something around the focus areas of the member's work. Then you could set up a meeting specifically to talk about what they read and to answer any questions they might have. You could host a Jeopardy-style game or some kind of quiz activity, asking members to respond to Vista mission, sponsor mission, goals, and history. This could be done in person or remotely, and it's often a fun and safe way for people to learn or to test their knowledge. And another idea is to bring your member with you to any events where they can be exposed to the service area that your project is working in. It's a great chance to meet partners working on similar issues and to see more the role the agency plays in the larger landscape. So next, we'd like to learn what type of cause orientation activities your project includes in its orientation. And Eric's going to explain this activity.
We're going to use the Jamboard for the next few activities so that you can share some of your experiences and your ideas with your colleagues. We'll then gather your ideas and make them available after the webinar. So here's how it'll work. In the chat, you can click on the link to the Jamboard and feel free to keep it open for the next few activities during the session. To add an idea to the board, you'll simply go to the left menu and click on the icon that looks like a sticky note. Then you can type your idea in the block that appears. You can change the color if you want and move your note around the board. In the Jamboard, share one way that you orient members to the mission and purpose. This could be the mission of your organization or the mission of AmeriCorps. And to make your idea useful for other leaders to adapt and implement, please include some specific details. If you're a VISTA member, share an example of how you were oriented to cause that you think is effective. We'll give you 3 minutes to jot down any activities on the Jamboard, and if you do run into any trouble, please let us know in the chat. Okay, thank you very much for all those responses. Great work.
Yeah, I agree with Eric's assessment. lots of different ideas here, a great variety of them. And just to echo, we are going to collect all of these. I'll put them together into a handout, and I'll be sharing that tomorrow so that you'll be able to have a list of all these ideas going forward. So thank you for participating. Let's look now at the next area that your orientation should include. And just a second, we'll get back to the slides. All right, so the second area, and this one is probably the biggest part of your orientation, is that of systems orientation. Systems orientation provides a context for the member, and it helps them to understand how they fit into the processes of the project. You'll want to include both your organization systems and those of AmeriCorps Vista, and that includes things like requirements and restrictions of both. The systems orientation includes how the organization works, what the structures and processes are that they use to accomplish their goals, what different parts of the agency does, and what the people who do there, the people who work there, what they do. Sorry. This also covers policies and procedures, day-to-day activity, how to get things done, and things like working hours, leave policy, timekeeping, teleservice, all that kind of stuff, as well as your technology, the communication systems that you use, and other equipment that your members might need to be using. And while AmeriCorps provides orientation to many aspects of being in the National Service family, you'll want to make sure to contextualize AmeriCorps in your project structure and operations. Is the project structure a multi-site project, a single site, or is it an intermediary? Make sure your members know. Also, share the sustainability goals the project is building towards and how the members' capacity building activities will contribute to that. This is also a good place to make sure to cover the connection to their VAD, as well as any data collection and reporting requirements that they might have. And though the VISTA member orientation provided by us here at VISTA covers things like the terms, conditions, and benefits, your orientation should reinforce those and provide support wherever needed. As you can see, there's a lot that can go into systems orientation. Before we go any further, we want to hear from one of your VISTA leader colleagues who has identified some very specific needs that his VISTA project has related to cause and systems orientation.
We are very happy to have Mike Rowley with us. Mike is a VISTA leader with the University of Alabama at Birmingham AmeriCorps Vista statewide project, which is an intermediary project that has 57 AmeriCorps Vista members serving in 16 counties. More than half of their VISTA members serve in the Birmingham metro area, and most of the rest are spread across what's known as the Black Belt region of Alabama, a largely rural and agricultural area known for its rich soil. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad to be here. As you mentioned, the UAB AmeriCorps Vista statewide program is an intermediary site through the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Our members serve in a wide variety of small community agencies throughout the state, providing capacity building services based on the needs of the community and host site. As Eric mentioned, many of our sites are in quite small communities in rural areas that don't have a lot of infrastructure that we might take for granted. Things like dependable cell phone service and readily accessible internet. Recent storms have weakened the infrastructure, making communications more difficult. So that's all background on the project where I serve. As I've gotten more familiar with the members on the team, I recognize a common theme emerging. Many of the members identify primarily and sometimes exclusively with their host site. Some are unaware that they are part of a larger intermediary project managed by the university. I saw this as a challenge that we need to overcome. Some might think it's not important for members to know about the project structure, but here are a few challenges I've observed related to this. If members don't know how their site relates to the sponsor on the project, they have a hard time understanding who I am as the VISTA leader and to see how I can support them in what they're doing. For some, the disconnect is so major that they don't even see themselves as AmeriCorps members. So when they are asked to describe who they are and what they do, for example, at a community meeting, they say they work at the host site, and they miss the whole connection to the statewide project and the national program. By not fully understanding their status as AmeriCorps members, they misunderstand important aspects and limitations of their role. For example, it's easy for them to forget the sustainability principle of VISTA. We have some members who are planning to approach their county commissioners about local issues, and they don't fully understand the limitations of the VISTA member role around lobbying and other political activity. And even at an individual level, there are consequences of members not identifying with the intermediary and with AmeriCorps. When I came on as leader, I was getting to know the members on the project, and I came across one who was really struggling financially. In talking to her, I found out she had a lot of medical expenses and she had not signed up for the AmeriCorps healthcare allowance. So all of that was coming out of her pocket when she could have had AmeriCorps pay for that. So I could see there were lots of consequences from this one challenge. And what it came down to is we were lacking in some aspects of orientation, specifically in the cause and systems area. I talked with my supervisor, and together we came up with some strategies to address this. We came up with 3 strategies to get started, and we're working on some others, but I'll share the 3 we have come up with so far. First, we added a piece about the project structure to orientation, covering the relationship between the project sites and the university as intermediary. We also talked about the connections to the AmeriCorps program and what that means for each member and for the sites. I also drafted up a template members can use for their minute message based on the activity and the VMware coursework on the VISTA campus. I asked them to tailor it to their site and their VAD, and then I share it with the group. I think this activity has helped bring it home for them. I added a review session on VISTA program terms and conditions, which they seem to really appreciate. Some VISTA members have been interested in moving into more advocacy work, so it's important for them to know the limits on that activity governed by the Hatch Act. So we spend time looking at what that means to their service and also review the other policy stuff. And there's a bonus 4th one. Finally, I made a point to remind them of all the benefits of AmeriCorps VISTA service so that they don't miss out on the things they're entitled to and that could really help them. I created a benefits guide that is posted on our intermediary's website. This document has links to food assistance applications, housing assistance information, and free or low-cost resources in the Birmingham metro area available to our members. I've also joined the project coordinator in preliminary interviews with potential members. I've gone over some of the benefits in greater detail, and I've given anecdotes about my first year of service and how taking advantage of the many benefits available to us as AmeriCorps members helped me thrive. I always emphasize the importance of asking for help.
All right. Thank you for those examples, Mike. I think they really help to underscore the importance of orienting members, and particularly to cause and systems. So appreciate you being here to share with us. So I'd like to share a couple of general examples of system orientation activities. First, you can schedule and provide tours of the sites where members will serve. If a member is going to split their time between 2 places, well, then you can include tours of both. Different sites can have, a lot of differences between them, different cultures and norms. And your members are going to need to be familiar with how things work in the different locations where they'll be. Another idea, you can ask the member to share their VAD with program staff and then interview them about what they do so that the member can better understand what each person is doing in the organization and what areas they focus on. The member makes time to ask each person where challenges and successes lay, and then any programs they or the service beneficiaries want to see in the future. And finally, you can review the policies and procedures of the organization using a scavenger hunt, a game, or some other activity that will engage your members. And now, like before, we want to hear from you with some examples, and Eric's going to cue that up for you.
Thanks, Andy. We're going to continue our brainstorming using the Jamboard that you accessed earlier. This time, we're going to use the second page of the board. So simply use the navigation arrows at the top of the screen to move on to page 2. Systems orientation is a broad category, so we're going to drill down to a topic within systems orientation. In the Jamboard, we're asking you to describe how you introduce members to a specific policy or procedure at your organization. And if you are a VISTA member, describe one way that you were oriented to systems. And as a reminder, systems topics include anything that shows how things work or should work in your organization. This includes broader topics like structures and processes used by your organization to accomplish their work. And it can also include specific things like timekeeping, tracking, and reporting data, IT systems, and remote work policies. We'll give you about another 3 minutes to jot down any actions, advice, or help that made a difference in your process of entering service. And again, if you have any troubles, please let us know in the chat. Okay, lots of responses came in. Thank you very much for those responses. This looks amazing. I can't wait to take time to dive into each of them.
Yeah, agreed, Eric. Lots of examples here. You know, those are going to be great resources for all of you. So thanks for sharing so generously. All right, so we're going to switch back to the presentation here and then take a look at our third theme, which is social orientation. And the social aspects of an organization refer to its culture and the relationships between its members and partners. Other topics to include in a social orientation are things like the communication style of staff people, especially, say, the supervisors, the overall organizational culture, and then any practices, rituals, or traditions that are important to the organization. Social orientation includes official greetings, welcoming activities, and those can be formal or informal, presentations, and initiating personal contacts. The key is making sure that your member meets the people that they're going to be working with, and of course that will vary depending on the type of the organization and the project. Guiding members to these key contacts will help them establish relationships and begin figuring out how they're going to work and communicate with them during their service year. These relationships will help them and the project be successful, so investing time in social orientation is time well spent. Now on the VISTA side, AmeriCorps brings its own social context and culture into play, and so including some social orientation to the AmeriCorps aspects of service can also be really important. This means the leader role as the leader of team members, how their cohort or team of members will function, and how they're going to work together, and how members can connect with other AmeriCorps members, either those on the team or those who are part of adjacent projects with the sponsor. You could also even talk about members who are serving anywhere within AmeriCorps. Because national service is a unique entity, connecting with others who serve can be a great help as your members navigate their year. And as before, here are some examples of social orientation activities. So you could make announcements organization-wide when your members join your team, including things like when they're starting, providing a little summary of what your members will be focused on for the year. You could encourage staff and others at the organization to send your members a message or to reach out in some way to welcome them. You can ask your team members to engage with new members during their first week, with little things like placing treats by their workstation so that people, can come in and say hi, or host an event where staff meet the vistas at your organization. And finally, you could suggest to a member that in a meeting with key people that they're working with regularly, that they discuss things like their communication style, their work style, and other preferences or topics that might help them to get to know each other and break down any barriers that might exist to working effectively together.
You're doing a great job with the Jamboard brainstorming, so we're going to go back to it and this time look at the third page of the board. And again, at the top of the page, click on the navigation arrows to move to page 3. As you probably guessed, this time we'd like to get your ideas for social orientation. So we're asking you to please share one way that you orient members to the people of the project. What ways of introducing key people have been most effective? How do you introduce them to the team? How do you introduce them to community partners? And if you are a VISTA member, what was one aspect of your own social orientation? Again, we'll give you a couple of minutes to jot down your idea, and please try to provide enough detail so that someone else could adapt and use the practice. Looking at these responses, I want to be part of your orientation team. These are wonderful ideas. Thank you very much for sharing. Andy, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I was thinking the same thing, like someone has mad cooking skills. I want to be on that project. You've got a lot of great, really inventive, I think, activities that you engage your members with to help them connect with one another, get to know each other, just develop some comfort, which, is really important. It seems like, spending time on these kinds of games or activities can seem like maybe it's too much fun and not really work, but actually to build an effective team, you have to get to know each other, and these are great ways to do that. So thanks for all these ideas. We are going to move on and look at a few other considerations you might want to keep in mind. So we're going to finish up with just a brief mention of some other things on how you can orient your members. And it's the number of members that you have serving on a project can vary from one to another, as well as where your members are located. Most likely for your projects, I'm guessing members are probably not all in the same location. So when you're going to provide orientation, there are things you need to think about in terms of where and how you're going to reach your members. So the first consideration is what type of grouping you'll have. Some activities are suited to being done one-on-one, like having your members meet up with a community leader. Some are better suited to small groups, like members working at the same site. And there are also times when gathering a larger group of members together makes sense, like holding a project-wide meeting, where you can have a discussion on a topic, and then members, they're all getting the same message, and then they have a chance to discuss. A second consideration is what mode you're going to use. And by that, I mean, is it feasible to bring your people together in person? Or is it just more realistic, easier, and cost-effective to host a virtual meeting or to have members complete an online course individually or watch a recorded webinar on their own? In some cases, the orientation for new members may include a bit of each, right? A mix, a hybrid of modes and groupings. A multi-site project might have a hybrid orientation where members do remote activities during the first part of the week, and then everyone comes together later on for an all-day in-person session. Then perhaps the next week, individuals meet one-on-one with their supervisor, they meet other key staff people and their VISTA leader, where some of those meetings are in person and some of those meetings are remote. It's likely that project directors or supervisors may be the ones making the final decision on how the orientation is presented, but VISTA leaders can keep these things in mind when planning activities, and they can make some recommendations. So we've been asked you to think a lot and share about orientations that you've been through or the orientations that you're doing. And I'm guessing that you have some activities that you personally like to use to engage your members, whether that's during in-person orientation or remotely. So we're gonna, in our last activity, we're gonna ask you to share some of those.
And for this activity, we'll go back to the Jamboard one more time, this time navigating to the 4th page. And as Andy alluded, we're asking you to share your favorite orientation activity for either in-person or remote situations. This could be for any topic and in any configuration. What has worked for your group that others might be able to use? Again, we'll give you a couple of minutes to jot down a specific activity. And remember, it can either be in-person or remote. Thank you once again for some great and wonderful responses. These look amazing.
Yeah, so I agree. We've gathered a lot of good examples here. So thanks for participating in that. And as mentioned, I'm going to collect all of these, and I'll be sending out an email tomorrow, and I'll have a link to that where you can capture all those ideas. All right, so now back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Andy. We're going to take a minute now and ask to see how well you followed up along with today's presentation. You'll see a poll pop up in just a second with 3 sample orientation activities. For each of these activities, we want you to match the theme it covers: cause, systems, or social. Select one answer for each activity and click Submit. The first activity is: a new member attends a meeting with their supervisor and the heads of 2 departments that focus on providing services to the community. For the second activity, a leader hosts a virtual trivia game with a team of new members on topics of organizational history, community need, and the focus of the AmeriCorps project. And the third activity is a leader holds a one-on-one meeting with a new member to explain the member's data collection duties, their site's work hours, and how to record service hours. I'll give you a little bit of time to answer the question in the poll. Seeing quite a few responses coming in. As a reminder, don't forget to hit submit. It will not submit itself. Well, we'll give you a few more seconds to get some final responses in. Okay, we will go ahead and close the poll and we'll take a look at the results. Thank you for responding. So in the first activity, where a new member attends a meeting with their supervisor and 2 department leads, that one is social orientation. The second one was a virtual trivia game about organization's history, community need, and the focus of the VISTA project. This one is cause orientation. And the third activity is a leader in one-on-one meeting with a new member where they discuss the site's work schedule, leave policies, and recording service hours. This one is systems orientation. Nice work. Thank you again for participating. We would like to leave you with some resources related to what we covered today, especially if you want to learn more about the topic of orienting members. First is a new employee orientation guide from the Academy to Innovate HR. Second is an article in Forbes magazine called New Hire Orientation Checklist and Best Practices. Both of these may have some ideas that you can adapt for your own on-site orientation. The third resource is one of ours that was developed for sponsors, and it shows a couple of examples of sample OSAT schedules, and it also lists the topics that VISTA sponsors typically include in on-site orientation and training, as well as the sequence and timing. The recommended resources are listed on the handout after the slides. Today we covered why orientation is so important, the 3 themes of orientation to cover: cause, systems, and social. We spent some time sharing your ideas with the group for how you orient around all of these themes. Finally, we briefly discussed considerations around how you group members for orientation activities and what mode might meet their needs best. Thank you for your participation. We'll get to a couple of questions in just a moment, but before we do that, I want to invite you to complete a short evaluation of this webinar. Your feedback will help us make these sessions most useful for you and other leaders, and we really appreciate your feedback. The survey is probably already open in your web browser, but if not, the link is also available in the chat. So as a reminder, if you have a question, we may have time for one question, you can post it in the chat. We'll wait just a second to see if any questions come in. Again, we'll be using the chat for any questions. And as a reminder, after the session, we will be providing, Andy will send out an email with information about how to access the recording of the presentation, as well as the copy of the slides. So yes, we will make sure that we get a copy of that out to you. Checking one more time to see if any questions are coming in.
Yeah, Eric, I see a question. Can we have access to the Jamboard after this is over? Well, what we're going to do is I will actually collect all the ideas from the Jamboard, put them into a document, and share a link to that, because over time the Jamboard will become inactive. So we're going to capture those, and like I said, I'll be sending you an email tomorrow with a link to the recording of the webinar in case you want to watch it or share it with anybody, and all of those great ideas that you generated on the Jamboard.
Great, thank you very much for that, Andy.
Yep, and I'll include a copy of the slides as well.
Well, before we leave the presentation today, I do want to mention our next webinar. So we'll highlight that our next webinar will be on reducing bias in interviewing, and that'll take place on Thursday, May 25th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Watch your inbox for an invitation, and I encourage you to attend that webinar. I do also want to highlight that there's a new feature on the Vista campus that allows you to upload resources that you have created and share them with your Vista leader colleagues. It's located on the Vista Connect side of the Vista campus. Simply in the gray menu bar on the Vista Connect is the Explore drop-down menu. Open the Explore menu and select Groups. In that list of groups, you can select Leaders, and then look for the link to resources in the medium blue menu bar towards the right side. You will see a button to Create Resource. Click that Create Resource button to open the form. And then you'll enter some information about the resource and describe how it can be used, and then attach either a Word doc, Excel worksheet, PowerPoint presentation, or PDF. Make sure you click Save, and your resource will be queued for moderator review. Once approved, it'll appear on the site. This feature is brand new, so you can be among the first to upload resources and start building the library of tools to share with your peers. And of course, it's one more way that the Vista campus can support your service. So thank you to Andy and to Mike, and especially to you for your service and your participation today. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you and have a wonderful day.